Hi everyone, it's Sienna. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about some of the etiquettes and cultural aspects that is always good to know when you're traveling to Korea. Before we get into it, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more Korean related videos. And let me know if there's anything else that you want me to talk about. There's different customs and cultures that are specific to each country that you visit. And today I'm going to be focusing on some of the cultures and the basic etiquettes that a lot of people abide by in Korea. So if you are planning a visit to Korea anytime soon or planning to live here, these would be good to know for your trip. Okay, then let's get into it. First, I want to begin with some of the customs and rules in public transportation. If you are going to live in Korea or going to stay here for a long time, then you're probably going to be using public transportation on a daily basis. Let's start off with some basic rules in Korean subway. The very first thing that you should be aware of is that Korean subways are very quiet. The noise level is low, and it's important to be aware of how loud you are speaking. If you are obviously going with your friends and you're taking the subway with your friends, you can speak to each other, but just be mindful of the noise level. Koreans commute a lot, especially if we are going to work or just having a long day. We can be especially stressed out when we hear a lot of noise. So the Korean subway is designed to be quiet, and there's going to be a lot of commuters and a lot of users just for them to use it in a convenient manner. So a lot of the times you'll see Koreans with headphones in or reading a book or just on their phones, completely immersed in a K-drama that they're watching. So it's a very this is the me zone, and they don't want anyone to bother them. I noticed a lot of foreigners these days coming into Korea and using the subway, and sometimes they don't realize that it's different here. I know that in the subways in America or Canada, they didn't really have a specific noise level. It was just for certain trains. So we could speak as loudly as we wanted, and as long as we didn't completely shout, it was fine. But in Korea, it's important to talk in a very hushed tone with your friends because you don't want to disturb other people. So there was a whole group of foreigners the other day. They were speaking pretty loudly, and no one else was speaking besides them. And I heard a Korean mom explain to her kid, being this is what we call 민폐. So 민폐 is a word that Koreans use to describe someone that is a public disturbance. So you don't want to be one of those people, so just be mindful of the noise level, especially when you are talking on the phone as well. Obviously, if you're alone, you're probably not going to be talking, but when you are on the phone, just remember to talk quietly. This especially applies to buses. Bus drivers will actually turn to the person that's talking pretty loudly and tell them to be quiet, be respectful. If you're listening to music super loudly and everyone else can hear that, you should also be mindful of that as well. Another thing that you should be cautious about is Korea has very strict laws on protecting random people's photos being taken. A lot of the times you'll see YouTubers in Korea that are bloggers, and they have to be mindful of blurring out everyone's faces. It's called 초상권 침해 in Korea. So it is our right to privacy, and we obviously don't want a random stranger take a photo of us and that blows up on the internet. Be extra cautious when you are filming a video outside. Obviously, if it's just the outside area, we don't really care, but when you're especially in the subway, taking pictures is a very sensitive matter because there's a lot of men taking inappropriate upskirt photos of women. So just be careful of where your hand placement is. If you're filming a video, make sure that there's no one around. You don't look kind of suspicious. Another thing is to walk on the right side when there's a lot of people. If you're walking up the stairs, or if you're exiting or walking where there's one entrance, so people that are leaving is going this way, and then people that are coming into the subway station is going this way. You want to kind of stick to the right in all cases so that we don't bump into each other. So there's no outside food or drinks allowed in the subway stations or buses. In the subway, you can put things in your bag, but there's bins that are frequently placed all around the subway station. So if you need to use the subway, you can just throw it out. This applies to buses as well, especially buses, because there's a bus driver that looks at what you're carrying, and you don't want to have food and then it spills. So they just don't want any outside drinks or food allowed on buses. Need to be cautious, especially if you are carrying food that smells. Obviously you can order takeout and then take it to the subway, but just like don't eat it in the subway. When you get on public transportation in Korea, you'll notice that you will see some seats that are pink or yellow. It could be a seat that's covered in like a pink sheet or a yellow sheet. The pink one is reserved for pregnant women only. Sometimes if you have like really bad period cramps, you can kind of like sit there, but it needs to be available for the pregnant people if ever they are in the vicinity. Sometimes there's like men that kind of sit on it and then they get really bad looks. Just make sure that it's always available and just don't sit there. Like, it's as simple as that. Just don't sit. We can stand. For the pregnant women, obviously it's kind of rude to assume that they're pregnant. Sometimes if I'm wearing like a really thick winter jacket, some people would stand up for me and I'm like, I'm not pregnant. So that's kind of rude to make assumptions, but the best way is just to look at their bags, and sometimes they'll be carrying like a keychain that they get from the government that says like, oh, I'm pregnant, so that if you're using public transportation, people will know and they will give up their seats for them. Same thing with the yellow chairs. Those are reserved for the elders. If you are taking the subway, you'll notice like a big row of seats, and then on the side there's a little row of seats. Those are reserved for people that have physical disability or elders or pregnant people. So just be mindful not to like hover around the area. Sometimes I do see like foreigners that don't really know, and then they'll just sit there and then they get weird looks. But I feel like they have signs everywhere, so you just look around and then it's not that hard. Especially for the buses as well. Usually when you first walk into a bus, on both sides at the very front they'll have yellow seats, and those are for elders. So usually just sit in the back. Or if you are going on a really long trip and you want to sit down, like sometimes I have really long hard days at work, and when I go home it's about an hour and a half commute and I really want to sit down. So you know, you just kind of look around, and then if there's no elders, you can sit there. But just remember that if there's an elderly coming in, or if there's a pregnant woman, then obviously try to give up your seats for them. But on subways, people just don't sit at the booth that's for the elderly. Like, we just leave that empty. I guess it's because it's easier to stand in the subway and to balance yourself. Another thing that you should keep in mind, because I know that different countries are different, when you are using the subway or the bus in Korea, make sure that you always tap out. So you tap in when you first get on the bus, and when you're getting off, there's another machine where you can tap off. Remember to do that, because you will get a full charge if you don't tap out. Sometimes you get discounts if you are transferring, and if you're using another bus or another subway after, then it transfers automatically. So make sure you're tapping out. So I briefly touched this topic before, but eating on public transportation like buses and subway is not allowed. You can carry food if it has a sealed cover or if it's like takeout, and there's not going to be any spills or anything. And if ever you leave something behind on the subway, what you need to do is you have to remember the subway cart number. In Korea, every single subway cart has a number, and you can see it right below on the floor when you first get in. So remember that number. It's like 7-1, 7-2 something. And then you just go to the workers at the nearest subway gate and you ask them for help. And most times you will be able to get it back. Let's move on to the next scenario, and let's put ourselves in a Korean restaurant. So when you first walk into the Korean restaurant, you obviously want to wait for the worker to help assist you, but most times they'll just say to find a seat yourself that you feel is very comfortable. So you just go in, find yourself a seat, look at the menu, and then once you are ready to order, you can just call them and just say like 저기요, which just means excuse me. Or most times they will have a bell on your table, so you can look for the bell and press that, and then soon the workers will come and take your order. For high-end restaurants, they probably won't have a bell, so you just want to make eye contact with them or just simply raise your hand. And as for some markets and more traditional Korean restaurants, they also might not have a bell. In that case, you want to call the owner and say 사장님. So you just call 사장님, which just means owner, and then they will come to you. Now when the waiter comes, you don't obviously have to read your full menu. You can just point to the pictures and you can speak in simple English, or you can use translating apps to help you decide. Now a lot of the times restaurants in Korea, they don't give you utensils. You have to look for them yourself first. So usually if you are seated on a table, you can look for drawers on the table, and they will have utensils and also napkins for you to freely use. That's very convenient, because sometimes you can drop your utensil and then it's annoying having to ask the worker for more, so you can just grab one yourself. As for napkins, if you go to a lot of like the old traditional restaurants, they will often have napkins like hanging on the ceiling. So make sure you look around first around you before calling the waiter. Now, after eating at a restaurant, usually Koreans will stop by a cafe, and there's so many different pretty cafes all around in Korea. But a lot of these cafes will have a strict rule that's one order per person. So even if you are feeling super full, you still need to order a drink. It could be, a cup of coffee or a dessert. This is because they believe that running a cafe is pretty expensive. You gotta pay rent, you gotta pay all these other things, and there's a lot of people that just come, order one thing with a group of friends, and just stay there for hours. So that's why they made the rule that every single person needs to order one drink or one menu. This only, again, applies to certain cafes, but these days I think more and more cafes are doing that. If you are feeling too full to order anything, I always order it to go later on, because there's so many times when I've already been eating like the whole day and then I simply don't have enough room to order another dish or another drink, so you can order it to go after. Now, when you're shopping in Korea, there's so many different underground shopping stores that you can go to, and not just in a mall or department store. A mall or department store, they are going to have changing rooms where you can try on the clothes. However, if you are going underground shopping, then most likely you're not going to find a changing room, or they're not gonna allow you to try on the clothes before, especially if you are wearing makeup, or if you want to try on a dress or a white colored clothing. Some clothing stores will give you a face cover that you just put over your head to try on the clothes so that none of the makeup comes off. I get a lot of Instagram DMs recently about people, foreigners specifically, that ask me how Koreans are going to be helpful when they are ordering something, going about doing their everyday life if you don't speak any Korean. I believe that there's absolutely nothing that you should be concerned about, because people know that if you're a foreigner, you probably don't speak English, but they will still speak to you in Korean anyway. And then if you can't speak it, then you can just speak to them in really simple words or phrases, and you just need to remember to be patient with them, especially if they are not quite comfortable or they have some issues speaking in English. But most Koreans are friendly towards foreigners, and they are willing to help. As for what Koreans think of foreigners, Korea used to be a fairly homogeneous country, not have that many foreign visitors, and people would look at you if you're foreign and things like that. But nowadays, there's so many foreigners coming in, there's so many foreigners living here. If you just go out, you'll see so many foreigners lately. We are becoming a lot more open-minded, and people are going to be willing to help you. So you don't have anything to worry about in that regard. But obviously, learning simple phrases like how to say goodbye, how to say hello, and how to say thank you would be very useful. And when you first greet someone, you want to do like a small bow. It's not like a whole thing, it's just like a little nod that you can do and just say 안녕하세요. Or when you are at a convenience store or you're just accepting money, just make sure you do everything with two hands. It just shows respect. And remember to take your shoes off if you don't take your shoes off at your house. A lot of foreigners that reach out to me have so many concerns about Korea being a safe country. Korea is a very safe country to travel to. You just need to be careful, obviously, of the nightlife and the drinking and stuff like that, but that's literally everywhere you go. You can run to the convenience store at 2 a.m., you'll be fine. There's CCTV cameras placed all around, security guards, and when it comes to leaving your belongings in public, like you'll see a random bicycle out, or you will just leave your things at a cafe when you need to go to the washroom, like your whole laptop and your phone and everything sometimes. No one is going to take your belongings, because if you do, there's CCTV camera everywhere, and they're most likely going to be humiliated on the internet. So if anything, Koreans are shocked when we visit other countries and we learn that people just steal left and right. If ever something does happen, you can always call 112 to report something if you're ever feeling unsafe. Korea is also well known for its nightlife, so even during the late hours of the night, there's going to be bright light. However, with that being said, you should always be cautious of your surroundings and take precautions wherever you go. Another basic etiquette that you should have also goes hand in hand with, being patient with the Korean workers or anyone that you come across if they don't speak any English. I've noticed if I go to Itaewon, there's a lot of foreign men, and it has been like this for a pretty long time. There's a lot of foreign women or people in the military that are saying very disrespectful things towards the Korean women here. And this has happened to me a couple of times as well, where like a foreigner would approach me and start saying things that are inappropriate in English, thinking that I don't speak any English. If you are traveling anywhere in the world and it's not your country, just remember to be respectful of the people that are obviously living here. Okay, that concludes my video today about some of the basic cultural etiquettes that you should learn before coming to Korea. I hope you guys found this useful in your next travels, and let me know if you have any more questions or video ideas down in the comments below. Don't forget to follow my Instagram. It is at Sienna Hong. I've been getting a lot more DMs, so please bear with me if I take a little bit more time, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Okay, bye guys!